Welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, July 10th, and we have a great show for you today. We have Ann Meyers, the chair of the Brookline Economic Development Advisory Board, and she and I, in an interview just a few days ago and pre-recorded, talk about all things economic development, commercial development, new construction, supporting existing commercial activities, the implications on Brookline's taxes and taxpayers, and more. So I hope you will stay tuned for that interview. First, as always, we begin with the news. Last week, the United States Congress gave final approval on the One Big Beautiful Bill. Included in the bill are provisions that would implement almost $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts, make the 2017 tax cuts for the wealthy permanent, increase spending on immigration enforcement by almost $100 billion, limit Medicare's ability to negotiate lower drug prices, impose new requirements for SNAP food stamp benefits, and roll back several tax credits related to clean energy. Beautiful indeed. President Donald Trump has announced his plans to impose tariffs on dozens of countries on August 1st. The tariff plans have been on again, off again for several months. TSA announced that travelers will no longer be required to remove their shoes as they go through security at airports. The Massachusetts Senate passed a bill earlier this week that would require schools to ban the use of cell phones during the school day. The bill now goes to the House for consideration. Lisa Field, a Taunton Democrat, was officially declared the winner of the special election for the 3rd Bristol District by just 15 votes following a recount. The seat became available after the passing of Representative Carol Doherty. Federal funding for summer programs, including adult basic education and integrated English language and civics programs, have been withheld by the federal government. This funding is being reviewed by the Trump administration to ensure compliance with his priorities. Gateway Arts, a Brookline nonprofit supporting artists with intellectual and developmental disabilities, officially opened its new studio spot on Station Street on Tuesday. It was previously located on Harvard Street, just across from St. Mary of the Assumption Church. The renovation of Brookline's Fire Station 4, located on Boylston and Reservoir, has officially begun. The project is expected to take 9 months. After a short court battle, a state land court judge has ordered the town to issue a special permit for the construction of a new synagogue for the Chabad Center at Chestnut Hill. Folks, that's the news. Stay tuned for TV on TV Part 2, the interview, coming up soon, right here on TV on TV on Brookline Interactive Group. And welcome back to TV on TV with me, Tommy Vitolo, right here on Brookline Interactive Group. As promised, today's guest is Ann Meyers. She's the chair of EDAB, the Economic Development Advisory Board, and we're delighted to have her on the show and help us understand how town volunteers and town staff interact with the business community to do their part in our complex and remarkable town of Brookline. Ann, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tommy.
And some folks know you and know the work you've been doing on behalf of Brookline for decades, but some of our viewers don't. So why don't you start by telling us what you've been doing your whole life?
My whole life is a long story because I've been around for a while, but my family and I moved to Brookline in 1977. My sons are graduates of the high school, and 2 of my 4 grandchildren are also graduates of the high school and what was then called Devotion. All my sons and grandchildren were at Devotion, and I spent most of my career working at Massport doing real estate development, non-airport real estate development, doing planning and execution of things like what's now the World Trade Center in South Boston and other development in South Boston and East Boston and Charlestown. And then I was at the Downtown Crossing Association for a number of years, which is the Downtown Business Association. So I've had experience in both development and business management. And I have been on EDAB for a number of years, and the Economic Development Advisory Board was created after Prop 2.5 in the early 80s as a way to try to generate more tax revenue um, to make up for the inability of the town to raise taxes the way it had been doing. And our mission that was stated in the bylaw at that time is to promote commercial development that enhances tax growth and offsets financial burdens for residents so the town can provide high quality programs and services. We aid in the growth and prosperity of the town's business community because that raises their tax assessments, which generates more commercial tax revenue. We improve the functional and aesthetic qualities of public space in commercial areas. We work to promote economic equity and inclusion and to ensure the long-term capital and strategic planning needs of the town are met.
So you answered the second question before I even asked it. What the heck is this EDAB all about? But thank you for doing so. The thing that I want to say out loud that, Anne, I know you have a sense for, and I certainly understand, but many viewers don't, is the way that property taxes and Prop 2.5 interact. So on existing property, the total revenue that the town can collect next year is no more than 2.5% more than this year, but that's on all property. So if your property becomes less desirable, your taxes might go up by less than 2.5%. If my property between this year and next year becomes more desirable, mine might go up by more than 2.5%. And the reason that relates to EDAB is this: if commercial rents are high, then the property value for commercial spaces is high. If it grows faster than residential values, then the commercial sector will pay a greater share of the entire tax burden, which means the residential folks, the folks who live in Brookline will or own an apartment building in Brookline will pay less. And so one way for people who live in Brookline to kind of alleviate some of the tax pressure is to have really thriving commercial areas so that those areas pay a bigger share of the taxes because their property values are higher because they're thriving. And that is a big part of why EDAB was created.
That's absolutely correct. But you didn't use the word existing when you were describing the tax base.
I apologize. Yes, on all existing.
Right. New growth adds to the base. And since EDAB's formation, we've worked on projects that in 2024, fiscal 2024, generated a little more than $6.5 million in tax revenue to the town. So new developments add to the base and generate more tax revenue.
So another way of thinking about it is, if existing commercial properties do better, then residential taxes might go down a little bit. If we create new commercial, then we have additional money to spend on other things. They're both important because the cost of running the town of Brookline is growing faster than 2.5% one way or another. And so the town is always, of course, looking for both. And that brings me to my question about commercial development. I know EDAB is interested in commercial development. The recent select board race talked a lot about commercial development. Why don't we start by giving folks an example of an effort? Let's talk a little bit about the Chestnut Hill commercial area study. Give us a sense for where that is and kind of what's at stake there.
Okay, well, the study area goes from the Newton line inbound east to the other side of Hammond Street, with a little portion where CVS and the Star Market parking lot are, which is in Brookline.
So along Route 9.
Along Route
all
9,
the
I'm
way
sorry.
west.
Yes, along Route 9, west to the Newton line. And basically, the Newton line is where the Citizens Bank building is, the office building where Citizens Bank is. And that is a planning study and in order to have developed, that is our best chance for generating commercial tax revenue in the future. Brookline does not have a lot of land. People sometimes say, why can Watertown and Somerville build new schools without an override, which we can't do? And the reason is that they had land to build Assembly Square, and Watertown had land to build a lot of, turned out, lab space, which isn't so great right now, but they had a lot of land along Arsenal Street and a lot of beautiful old buildings to renovate to do that. We don't have that in Brookline, and we're never going to have that in Brookline. So we have to figure out how to maximize the potential of the property that we do have. And there aren't a lot of those properties, and the Chestnut Hill property is one of the most significant ones. So we have a group of there's a committee that was appointed by the select board that is studying the potential future of that site. What could be there? And had we done this study 5 or 6 years ago, for example, probably we'd be looking at lab space. We're not looking at lab space anymore because that market is not doing well. And this is not something that's going to happen in a year or two. The build out of an area like that will happen over time. And there is one property changed hands a few years ago, and City Realty owns the western edge of that property. And to the extent that people have seen proposals, it's for that part of the property. And that is the committee is meeting regularly to figure out how to rezone that and how to make that a development that the town can benefit from and be proud of.
And of course, it's a challenge. That area does have thin access to the D line. The Chestnut Hill T stop is walkable from there. It's a bit of a hike. It's not a especially comfortable walk, but it's possible. It has reasonably good highway access, right? 128 is not that far to the west. You've got Route 9. I think the town values don't sort of swirl around lots of driving, but this is a part of town that doesn't, it has the 60 bus, I think, runs by once an hour or something. It's not very good bus service. And so it's in play now. Now, City Realty has been recently talking about going the route of a 40B. It remains to be seen if that is even a legal option for them or if it's what they want to do. So it's in play. Let's talk. So that's the biggest commercial area. Of course, there was some talk about lower Route 9 near Cypress Street, and there's always, a little here, a little there. One of the challenges is that people live really close to these places also. And they're not necessarily excited about a dramatic change in shadows or in motor vehicle traffic or perhaps noise near their home. Has that been an issue with the Chestnut Hill study?
That's an issue with every development anywhere, probably in the world, but certainly in Eastern Massachusetts, always. Again, at Massport, I worked on waterfront development. I spent a lot of time in East Boston. It's true everywhere. For Brookline now in Chestnut Hill, the issue is how do we balance the needs of a neighborhood with the needs of the town? And we all it's a long, none of this stuff happens quickly. It is a long process. We have a developer in this case involved. They need to respond to the issues that come up over the course of the meetings. And they've changed their proposal from the initial, I don't remember what it was, 20 stories maybe. And I'm not on this committee and I don't remember exactly what the current proposal is, but it's down. And as you mentioned, they did file for a 40B. I haven't spoken to them. I assume that that's their fail-safe, basically. They want to have a backup. But hopefully, and Waldo Durgan, which is the empty lot now in Coolidge Corner, started the same way. Chestnut Hill Realty had a proposal for a 40B, and the town said, let's see if we can come up with another proposal that's better for all of us. And there is a proposal that's been permitted for housing and a hotel. And unfortunately, the permits landed just at the beginning of COVID, and the market at the moment, the interest rates are high. It's very hard to build a project like that now, get financing to build a project like that, but hopefully that will happen sometime in the next several years. And hotels are the best commercial development we can get because we get commercial tax revenue and we get room tax revenue. And if there's a restaurant, we get meals tax revenue.
And the people who stay at that hotel, they go out to eat at other restaurants too.
Exactly.
And there
Exactly.
are restaurants I like to go to once a month. I can't keep them in business by myself. I love it when people from out of town eat at those restaurants to keep them open so that they're open when I want to go too, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned interest rates. You didn't mention the price of steel. I know that's an issue as well. I hear from some folks who sort of imagine that developers have all the money in the world and they're just being greedy and they could build right now if they wanted. I get the sense that your experience tells you that's not the case.
Well, some of them are very wealthy. Some of them like gold, everything. But in general, most of the local developers, um, certainly they want to make money, but they have to be able to, developers say penciling out. You need to look at, first of all, the risks are enormous in developments. If someone had started building a lab development 3 years ago at Chestnut Hill, for example, it would be empty now because the market for labs has tanked. And given cuts in research spending, scientific research spending at the federal level, probably they're going to have be tanked for longer than any of us imagined. So City Realty, as an example, is spending quite a lot of money up front working with the community, redoing their plans. You have to pay architects. The upfront costs of any development are very high. And then you need to get somebody, you need to have a plan that people think that you can get permitted. And in Brookline, that means getting 2/3, assuming it's a zoning change, you have to get 2/3 of town meeting to agree to it. And then you need to go to banks and investors to finance it. So you need to be able to show the investors that they're going to get a return on their money. So yes, developers make money, but at a huge expense. And often developers spend a lot of money and nothing happens. It's there are trade-offs involved in every development. Um,
So let's talk a little bit about existing commercial. We talked about development, but obviously the town has tremendous existing commercial. JFK, St. Mary's, Coolidge Corner, Washington Square, Brookline Village, Potterham, Cleveland Circle is kind of not quite ours, but we've got a little tiny bit over there. Uh, how does EDAB um, support existing commercial, and maybe what are you thinking are some things we should be thinking about between now and 2030, say, with respect to existing commercial that is unlikely or not imagined to dramatically change between now and then?
Well, we've done a number of things. We had some ARPA money. What we need to do is um, keep our commercial areas vibrant and competitive with others in eastern Massachusetts, but in the greater Boston area. That means competitive to some of the small commercial areas, not downtown Boston, but Roslindale and West Roxbury and Newton, the various villages in Newton, and other places like that. We Unfortunately, Brookline has a reputation of being a very hard place to start a business, to enter. We have a permitting process that is more arduous than many of our competitors, and the town is working now to streamline that process and make it easier. We're aware of the fact that we have a reputation as a hard place to do business, or to start a business. But over the last few years, the Economic Development Department has done a number of things. Fortunately, we got some ARPA money to do some of it. One of the things that makes commercial areas vibrant is just the way they look, and are they clean, and is there fun stuff to do? So the turkeys around town are, as an example, are a project of people from the Brookline Arts Commission and town staff work to select artists to do those turkeys, figured out where they should go. We have the outdoor dining program. Brookline was one of the first when COVID started to allow restaurants to have outdoor dining. We have a pop-up space on Harvard Street. I'm blanking on the number. It's down by Tati on Harvard Street, where a firm called Up Next finds small vendors who are mostly working online and gives them a spot to test whether they want to have a store. And that the mix there changes every few months. There's a new one in there now. I just walked down that way a couple of days ago, and I think there's a ribbon cutting for them sometime this week, actually. So that is an ongoing, rotating. Again, people can try out the space and see if their business is a good one. If they should look for space, hopefully in Brookline, if they decide to have a permanent spot. We have a facade loan program that helps store owners redo their signage or change their windows. We gave $500,000 in ARPA funding, provided 21 businesses. This is called the Small Business Resilience Grant. That was a one-time thing, but it gave 21 businesses in town the opportunity to complete 27 projects like HVAC updates, heat pumps, variety of upgrades like that. So that's a kind of stuff we've done in the last few years. Again, we had ARPA money, which isn't going to, hopefully, we won't be in a situation where we need that kind of money again. But the town, as did all retail during COVID, was really hurting. And it's not, there's some businesses that are doing as well as they were, but many of them are still clawing back from the COVID hits, particularly the restaurants. And as everybody knows, prices of food and everything are going up. It's hard to keep absorbing that. And it's an issue. So the town is doing whatever we can do to help support those businesses and keep our commercial areas vibrant, because people have choices. They can drive to the street or wherever
Or get on the train and go to Newberry Street.
exactly, and shop elsewhere.
Now, one thing that the town did recently from an administrative perspective, but folks don't yet see on the ground, is upzoned Harvard Street. It was not part of the MBTA Community Act. It was adjacent to it, right? It's not governed by the MBTA Community Act, thankfully, because that administration would have only allowed us to require storefronts on 25% of those parcels, and the entire length of Harvard Street is more or less storefront. I'm sure EDAB participated in those conversations. Can you speak for yourself or for EDAB in terms of, did we get it right? Did we do pretty good? Are we optimistic?
Yes, I'm optimistic. One of the things we told people, and yes, EDAB spent a lot of time working on this. One of the things, I went to some of the walking tours that Maria Morelli did early on in this process, and people were terrified that in a year we'd see cranes all over Harvard Street. And that is not going to happen. I would tell people that, if we see one or two of these developments in the next 10 years, that would be terrific. People were afraid that the small businesses were going to go out of business because developers or property owners would be incentivized to kick out the retail and build a 4-story building where they had a 2-story building now, and that just doesn't happen. If you own a building and you have a paying tenant with a long-term lease, it's not financially viable for you to kick them out and build 4 stories and have housing. It just doesn't, the numbers don't work that way. What EDAB did, and we have a number, everybody on EDAB either has had or does have a professional connection to the economic development business. We're architects, we're lawyers, and there are a number of people who are active in the development market, in the development community now, not in Brookline, but in Greater Boston. I'm retired, so I'm none of those things at the moment, but I was active. So we developed something called the ground floor commercial incentive to deal with the question of, are we still going to have retail space on Harvard Street? And what that is, it gives people some benefits if they invest in first floor commercial space. It is hard, for example, where the coffee blank Street, I guess it's
Blank
called,
Street
the
Coffee,
coffee
yeah.
spot on Harvard Street, the north end of Harvard Street near TJ Maxx, was empty for a very long time because when that building was built, there were no utilities, there was no basement. They didn't think about it as a they had to have a commercial space, but they didn't think about what that means. So we developed a way to make sure that it's easy for the first generation of retail to get into a space without making a huge investment. Blank Street is a large corporation. I believe they're based in Seattle. I'm not sure about that, but they're all over the place. So they can afford to invest in upgrading um, a, a space like that. But a small business cannot. If I wanted to open a men's clothing store, I would never be able to afford to do that. So the ground floor commercial incentive assists landlords in figuring out how, in helping them to get the space um, to a point where a small business could come in.
So, Anne, I know we could go on for another 25 minutes, but Brookline Interactive, they give us what they give us. We say thank you. And so we're just about out of time.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for all of your work and really for everyone on EDAB. EDAB has been a quiet workhorse of Brookline for decades.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that we are better for it without most of us even noticing or appreciating that work. So, Anne, please give my regards to everyone on EDAB. Let them know that we appreciate it. And we appreciate you coming on the show and giving us a little bit of a flavor for how commercial development, both retail and non-retail, works in Brookline, how our current commercial spaces are being used. High occupancy rate, we're doing well. We want to keep it there, though. That's an important part of living in Brookline, along with the schools and the parks and transit and public safety. Having these thriving retail centers are really nice for folks like me who don't always want to cook my own dinner. So we're very grateful. Folks, you've been watching Brookline Interactive Group. This is Representative Tommy Vitolo signing off from the week for TV on TV. We'll see you again next week.